Hi there, my name is Erin Scott and I'm here today to present our SEAL Professional Learning Series. This is session 1 and this is an introduction session today which is going to cover all the key high-level messages around the SEAL framework. So hopefully you're sitting comfortably and we're going to get started. So just before we come on to share our aims of our session today, I thought it'd be really nice just to take a little minute to pause and reflect. What is your current level of experience in using SEAL? Maybe this is something that you've used quite a bit in the past, or maybe you're completely new to this approach. But if you could just pause the video now and share with your colleagues for the next few minutes around any thoughts and feelings, any strengths or challenges around what you already think about SEAL, and then restart the video. So it's going to be a highly practical professional learning series where we're going to be using lots of different concrete materials and resources throughout our training for each level. But for this introduction session today, if you could just have the 5 SEAL coloured planners printed, ideally in A3 just so they're large and you've got plenty of room to kind of write on and scribble on, that would be really useful, and that'll just help kind of build your understanding as we're exploring the SEAL framework. So the key aims of session 1 are to provide a clear overview of the SEAL framework in relation to the structure, in relation to the content of each of the levels, and what does progression look like through each of the different stages. Our second key aim is to develop our understanding of just the key early number knowledge and skills that SEAL is going to help support and develop. Aim 3 is to consider why the SEAL framework might be a useful intervention approach to maybe use within your school or establishment. And aim 4 is to provide guidance and consideration around how you might want to structure an intervention. So SEAL stands for Stages of Early Arithmetical Learning, and this approach is not new. It's been used worldwide for now a number of decades. A lot of research and work got done back in the 90s by a man called Robert Wright, who was an Australian maths professor. And he did a lot of research and work into children's really early foundational number strategies and skills. And from that, the SEAL approach was born. It's often described as maths recovery, so maybe if you've heard of maths recovery, this is usually referring to SEAL. So as we said, it's now used internationally, not just to support all learners with early number skills, but also to support learners maybe demonstrating particular challenges with elements of number. It's used quite inconsistently across Scotland, whereby in some authorities they use it as a whole class approach. So maybe if you've worked or come from a different authority, you already have quite a bit of experience using SEAL, whereas in other authorities they use it much more as just an intervention approach. And what we're kind of advocating in the Scottish Borders is while there's really strong elements of practice that should be used at whole class level, for the actual SEAL framework itself, it should be used as an intervention approach. So learning about number is an essential part of early mathematics learning. And there's 3 important aspects to the concept of number. So you've got the verbal aspect, which is the spoken or heard aspect of number. So that's like number words, number sequences, orally saying them out loud. You then have the symbolic aspect of number. So that's the written part or being able to read different numbers, being able to identify different numbers, and then also being able to form your numbers. That's the symbolic part. And then you've got the quantitative part. And that's the how manyness aspect of number. So being able to look at a pattern and identify there's 4 dots, being able to count counters and being able to know how many there is, being able to add groups of counters together or quantities or everyday things. And what's really interesting is strength in one aspect doesn't automatically mean that the learner is going to be strong in the other aspects of number. And that's partly what we're going to be working on with the SEAL framework, is we're going to be thinking about these 3 different aspects of number, and we're going to be building learners' strength, learners' confidence in each of these 3 parts. So through using the SEAL framework, it's going to help and support learners to develop their counting skills, their ability to understand and work with different types of patterns. It's going to help develop their subitizing skills that we're going to come on and discuss and look at in just a wee minute. Through all of this work, you're going to help support learners develop their addition and subtraction strategies. And there's a lot of skills and tasks throughout the framework using different types of concrete materials to develop the addition and subtraction ability within 100. You're then also, throughout the SEAL framework, you're going to help support learners to develop their early multiplication and division skills, considering grouping and sharing and different array patterns. So we'll come on to all of those practical tasks as we move through each level, but there's a number of key skills that we're obviously helping learners to develop. If this is an area in terms of their counting development that you feel you would like further help and support, there's a little Padlet link on the screen. And this will take you to the Education Scotland Counting Series Padlet. And this will give you more videos and more support around learners' kind of foundational counting skills. So subitizing is a crucial foundational skill that we develop throughout the SEAL framework. So subitizing is the ability to identify a number of dots without having to count them individually. It allows learners to build a mental model and supports their early conceptual understanding of number. It's really important throughout using the SEAL framework to give them the opportunity to do this with lots of different types of dot patterns. So it might be domino dot patterns, random dot patterns, pairs patterns that we'll come on and look at and explore throughout our training. Interestingly, if a learner demonstrates persistent challenge, despite lots of subitizing practice and repetition, that's a key indication that the learner might have a mathematical difference and it might warrant further assessment and further support around this. So SEAL uses what we describe as a CPA approach. So this stands for Concrete, Pictorial, Abstract. And what this means is the concrete part is all the physical resources that learners can touch, can manipulate, can see, and that's very strongly featured throughout all 5 SEAL levels. You're going to be using a lot of different concrete resources with learners. The pictorial part is any visuals, any diagrams, any dot patterns, again, the 10 frame patterns, which you're going to be using throughout SEAL. And the abstract part is then the actual written kind of notation for numbers and for your mathematical symbols. And again, this features as we progress through the SEAL levels. And it's not a matter of just moving from concrete to just pictorial to abstract. The power of this approach is that you move between these 3 different elements as learners' strength and confidence and number skills improves. I think it's also really important to emphasise that lots of the concrete resources that are outlined and shared within SEAL are also fully embedded within our own SPC progression pathway. So learners should hopefully have had the exposure and have a chance to be practising with and getting really confident with many of these resources within the classroom itself. So you will see within our progression pathway, there's a kind of dark turquoise strand at the bottom, and lots of these resources feature really strongly throughout SEAL, as well as our SPC progression pathway. So there are 5 main stages to the SEAL numeracy framework. Each stage is outlined in a different coloured planner. The first few planners are just single-sided, but then when we move up to the 3rd level, they then go to double-sided planners. And you will notice the planners are all in a table format. Each stage is progressive and builds on the previous one. There is a real strong key focus throughout SEAL on activating learners' prior knowledge, whereby you'll do lots of revisiting of skills and revisiting of number knowledge with a very gradual increase in difficulty and complexity of tasks. And this is designed like this to really help build learner confidence, allow the learner to experience success, allow them to get that lovely feeling of achieving and succeeding in maths. The planners can be used to assess learners and identify where they are with their number knowledge and skills, but then it can also be used to support instructor interventions. So we're coming on now to discuss the different stages of SEAL. So the first stage is described as stage 0, and it's called the emergent stage, and it's outlined in the red planner. Now the number range for this planner is you're working from numbers 0 to 20 for the first column, but for the rest of the planner, you're working within the range of 0 to 10. Coming on then to stage 1. This is now described as the perceptual level, and it's outlined in the blue planner. So the number range for this level, for the first column, you're working in the number range of 0 to 30, but then for all the other columns, you're working in the range of 0 to 20. Stage 2 is called the figurative level, and it's outlined in the double-sided green planner. And we're now moving on and extending the number range from 0 up to 100. Stage 3 is the counting on stage, and it is outlined in the double-sided yellow planner. And this is us now working in numbers beyond 100 for the first 2 domains, and then for the rest of the planner, you're still kind of working within 100. And then stage 4 is the final stage of SEAL, and it's described as the facile stage, and it's outlined in the double-sided orange planner. And this is now us working with numbers from 0 up to 1000. So each SEAL planner is structured into 6 different columns. In SEAL, we call the columns domains. So you've got domain 1, domain 2, 3, and so on. And each different domain has a different title and has a different focus around either the tasks or the skill it's developing. You'll notice then within each domain there's different boxes, and each of these different boxes has a different task that's working on that particular skill. You will notice that there's a code in each box. That just links to one of the green support books, so don't worry or get hung up on the codes. You don't need to remember those at all, or you don't need to be too particular about the different codes. There's also a title in each little box that tells you the focus, and that's in bold. Also within each box, there's a little script that tells you what kind of things to say to the learner when you're working with them. And then also, in whatever colour the planner is, if you need a particular resource for that task, that is also highlighted within there. For example, whether it's 10 frames or whether it's dot cards, that will then tell you in the box whatever you need. We're now going to move on and consider how to effectively use the planners to support learners within your intervention session. So it's quite nice to almost think of domain 1 and 2 as your kind of warm-up tasks. So lots of counting forwards, counting backwards, lots of numeral identification, sequencing and ordering and those types of tasks. So you want to keep these quite short, sharp, changing the numbers, changing the range to keep the learner focused and engaged and warm up that maths brain. So again, you might be doing 3 or 4 different tasks from within each of these domains, but you also within a session, you don't want to just work vertically down the column. You also want to work horizontally across the different domains. So we're targeting different types of skills and tasks with our learners within one session. And again, that's getting that repetition, that's getting that trying to support that retention of key knowledge and information within your intervention session. Obviously, it's going to be very much an individual by individual basis in terms of the pace that you can go at, dependent on the learner's focus, the learner's concentration, how engaged are they with the tasks and activities. And this will also be determined whether you're working one-to-one with a learner or whether you're working with a small group in terms of your pace. So the SEAL approach can be used as a one-to-one intervention or with a small group of learners. And if you're doing it with a group, you definitely want them to be of similar ability and working from within a similar planner. Ideally having a kind of group size max of 6, and 6 is even quite a lot. And it's quite useful to have an even number of learners within your group, and that allows you the option of doing different partner tasks and allowing learners to partner up for some of the different activities. It's important you might be supporting a learner in class with some SEAL tasks and activities, but ideally if you're running a proper intervention session, having it in a really quiet, focused space is definitely going to work better to try and help and support the learner as best you can. So there's certain key principles that we want to consider and think about when using SEAL as an intervention approach. So overlearning should be one of these, and it should be a real key feature, whereby we're doing lots of repetition of tasks and activities to help improve learner retention, and then to also help improve the speed of learner retrieval. We want to consider it being a multi-sensory approach, and by this we mean we want to involve maybe using 2 or more senses. So it could be that they're seeing something, they're hearing something, they've got the touch, they're tactile, being able to touch something, and being really mindful of that when working with learners. How many senses are we allowing our learners to tap into? because having that opportunity to definitely use the concrete resources, think the steps out loud so they're verbalising that mathematical thinking is really powerful for helping to secure that learning and allow learners to transfer that knowledge to their long-term memory. It's also really crucial to allow learners to experience success. And this is really important to help build motivation and engagement and enjoyment in mathematics. It's really important to value mistakes and to see them as learning opportunities, building that kind of can-do growth mindset culture where they're valued, it's the effort that we're looking for, and just provide a space where learners feel they can develop resilience and perseverance to not give up when they make any mistakes or errors. And it shouldn't be seen as just getting the right answer as a goal. And a way to do that that's really powerful when working with your intervention group is when you are responding to a learner after they've given you an answer to a calculation, is just to thank them for a response. You can say great effort, but don't be overly gushy in terms of using lots of adjectives, fantastic, brilliant, because then they then start to look for that. And then if they're making an error and they don't get that from you, that could start to impact their confidence and motivation. So mathematical talk is also really powerful as part of your intervention approach when using SEAL. So you want learners to kind of verbalise and talk about their thinking. What's their strategy? How did they work that out? What was their thoughts around that? And this is going to really allow them to build and strengthen that mathematical vocabulary. It's going to help build confidence in their ability to explain their thinking, and also to then maybe start to see connections between concepts, between mathematical ideas as they're working with you. So we're now going to move on to consider how to structure your SEAL intervention session. So this will be dependent on assessment evidence and findings of your learner. So where are their key gaps? What key things do they need to work on? Within a session, it's quite nice to consider domain 1 and 2 as almost your kind of warm-up tasks, where you've got lots of forwards and backwards number word sequences, you've got lots of numeral identification and recognition and sequencing, and maybe doing 3 or 4 short, sharp tasks from each of those domains, where you're changing the number range and varying it up for your learner, continuing to increase the level of challenge if your learner's managing and gaining in confidence what you've tasked them to do. Your session might have a particular focus. So you might be, say, focusing more on addition and subtraction strategies and skills within your session, based again on that assessment evidence. But within your session, you want to almost have some coverage from most domains. So you're varying up the skill for the learner and you're keeping it interactive and fun and engaging. And it's worth also considering you might want to be adding in a few nice little games, even a nice wee game to end your session, again, just to maintain that level of enjoyment and fun. So the duration of your intervention session will be really dependent on your individual learners that you're working with and what their capacity is in terms of for maintaining that focus and engagement. Approximately 30 minutes can be a really nice length of time to cover quite a few different tasks and activities and get into that kind of bit of depth with your learner. And then you would also want a little bit of setup time. So you don't really want your setup time within your 30 minutes. It's really nice if you can be organised with your resources prior to your session starting, have these laid out, have them ready to go, and that means your session will run a lot smoother with your learner. There'll be less stopping and starting, and you'll have much better pace and flow to your intervention session. And again, generally learners will enjoy it a lot more if you're ready and tasks are short and sharp rather than them waiting, and that's when they will then start to kind of get bored and become disengaged. You might find, depending on the individual learner you're working with, that actually a 5 to 10 minute session is more than enough just to cover a few tasks with them, and then that's maybe all you think that they can actively engage for. But then hopefully maybe with increased time and working with that learner, you could actually start to build up the length of your session. So that's been a kind of whistle-stop tour of the kind of high-level messages around the SEAL framework, and just starting to think about how that might look as an intervention approach. What I'd like you to now do is just think, what have been your 3 key takeaways from our introduction session today? And maybe write down, make a wee note of these. What questions has maybe this training raised? It's maybe got you thinking about something in particular, or maybe a particular learner that you think would really benefit from this approach. It'd be really nice just to pause the video in a little minute and discuss as a staff team before proceeding on to session 2, which is then starting to take our deeper dive into our first level of SEAL. Our next slide is also just coming on to share some of the key texts and research that your school might already have around the SEAL approach. So on the screen, you can see the range of kind of SEAL texts and research and books that can help support you around delivering interventions within your own school. The first 4 books, so Teaching Number, Early Numeracy, Developing Number Knowledge, and Teaching Number in the Classroom, they're the kind of older texts that they started to be published from kind of 2006 onwards. The final 2, Teaching Mathematics Conceptually and On Track Numeracy, are the 2 new books that have just been released in the last few years. So again, these can be very useful. It is the green book you can see, Teaching Number, that links with all the codes in the SEAL planners and provides just more detailed information and a detailed description of each particular task. But thank you very much for your time today. I hope you found our initial introduction session useful and enjoyable, and I hope you can join us again for session 2.